Okay, hello everyone. For today, we will work on the unification of Egypt. Unification means when it came together, when it was unified or united, just like the states of the United States of America. They're united, they are brought together. And we'll work on the social classes as well. In ancient Egypt, they are very different from the social classes of our last civilization of Sumer. So today, by the end of the lesson, you should be able to identify 4 aspects of Egyptian social hierarchy. So let's get started. So Egypt comes together, meaning is unified. Upper and Lower Egypt were united, were unified, and brought together or combined by a king named Menes. Okay, and so before Egypt was unified, there was a separate Upper and a separate Lower Egypt. There were 2 very different kingdoms ruled by different kings. Sure, there were some things that they had in common, but at the time they functioned as 2 different countries, essentially, an Upper and a Lower Egypt. Different leader, different way of doing things, different location, obviously. And so King Menes unites Upper and Lower Egypt, becomes the first to do this, picking up where this guy in legend called the Scorpion King, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, where he left off. And so King Menes becomes the first vocab word pharaoh of ancient Egypt. It's the ruler of Egypt. So the word pharaoh stands for the ruler of Egypt, but the word pharaoh translates into a meaning great house, which would be like a palace or a castle. And that would be where the pharaoh rules from. So that's why they have that name. So King Menes becomes the first pharaoh to unite Upper and Lower Egypt, to become the great ruler, and to bring them together. And so he establishes the first dynasty in ancient Egypt. And we'll talk a lot about dynasties during this portion of the unit. And so a dynasty, for a vocab word, is a series of rulers from the same family. And so the dynasty of King Menes that he started lasted for a little over 200 years. So this means that people that were related to him, so he was the ancestor. He started this dynasty by being the first ruler, the first pharaoh, and that means that his sons and then grandsons and then great-grandsons and great-great-grandsons and great-great-great-grandsons were all, for just about 200 years, were rulers of that dynasty. He started the very first one. We will talk a lot about how the dynasties change and why there might be change in a family when a dynasty, one ends and one begins. We'll get more to that. So let's talk about the man himself, the rock star King Menes. So he unites Upper and Lower Egypt, and he immediately takes on the building of a new capital at the southern tip of the Nile Delta, and it later gets the name Memphis, like one of our students. And also obviously a city in the United States. So he builds this new capital, and the reason he does this is because you can't rule from the old capital of Upper or Lower Egypt, because that was the governmental center, if you will. It was the government center of a previous kingdom, basically a previous country. So, it's fresh start. We're going to build a new capital, and it's not an accident that it's at the southern tip of the Nile Delta. And you guys will answer some questions on why you think that might be, and you'll also do a reading on that. In order to make sure that both Lower and Upper Egypt, symbolically realized that they had been brought together, been united, King Menes literally combined the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt. And you'll read about that in the text and what they looked like and what it looked like when they were combined. And again, he establishes the first ruling dynasty that would last about 200 years. This is an artifact that is of King Menes, what he would have looked like, with a crown on his head. And that's really the first unifier. He's like the George Washington of ancient Egypt, the first real leader. George Washington obviously being the first president of the United States. And so King Menes is the first real ruler and unifier of ancient Egypt. So we're going to transition over to social hierarchy. You know that a social hierarchy is shown in the graphic organizer of a social pyramid, and it's the people that are at the top of the social pyramid there's less people up there, but they have more power and wealth, and as the pyramid grows, as it gets lower, it's more people but less power and wealth. So the Egyptian social hierarchy and the social pyramid that we show it by, I have a typo there, I apologize for Egyptian, was different from the civilization of and society of ancient Sumer. It had 4 groups, and in order, they are the pharaoh, who you now know is the king, and that word means great house. Next down you had the nobles, and in a minute you'll see what their role was. Remember, there's one pharaoh ruling as a god, and that's why he's at the tippity top of that pyramid with his ruling family. More people below him that are nobles, and we'll go over what their job is, like I said. Below that are the scribes, and if you remember from ancient Sumer, scribes are the people that are trained in school they're educated for about 12 years, and they have the ability to write things down. And it's not an easy job. It also means that you make a fair amount of money, and you have a fair amount of power. You're an important person. And then the craftspeople, these are the people that make things. And then the merchants that sell things, that means that they make a decent amount of money as well. Money and power is why they are over this lowest group, who have been grouped together. The farmers that produce food, the servants, and the slaves. They've all been lumped into this one giant group at the bottom of the Egyptian social pyramid. And so we'll jump ahead and look at that social pyramid. Remember, symbolically, it's not like everyone lived in one big old pyramid with these different levels. This is just the triangle that we use, just like the food pyramid. Chocolate and sugary snacks are up top. You should have less of them. Fruits and vegetables, and then grains at the bottom. Same thing here. We have more power, but less people. So less space taken up here by the pharaoh. Below him, the nobles. I say below him, but there was the occasion of a pharaoh who was a woman. We'll talk about that as well as we go through our unit. The nobles below him, you'll see what their job is next. A little bit larger because there's more of them than there is the ruler. Below them, the scribes that are highly educated, and they're the ones that write things down. That's why when you see stories and you see the insides of pyramids and tombs in ancient Egypt, that's all that writing on there that we'll talk about in a little while. Not today, but in the future. In the near future, that's from the scribes doing that, and then the craftspeople that make things. And at the bottom, the largest population. That's why it's the biggest group. At the bottom are the farmers, the servants, and the slaves. So let's get into this social hierarchy. So we know that the pharaoh is the ruler. He's the king of Egypt. And his role is he is viewed as a living god on earth. And when he dies, he will then ascend to the heavens, and he will join the other gods. But he is a living god on earth. Okay, so he is not just a human who's a king. He's a god king. And that'll be a theme that we talk about throughout the school year with different civilizations. So below him are the nobles. So your vocab word is nobles. And this is something that you're going to want to know because we'll use this as a theme through our civilizations and our studies this year as well. So these are government officials and priests. So 2 groups right there. The nobles is like the title for the people that are government employees, government officials that help run the government for the pharaoh because he can't be everywhere at once. And then the priests are also in this category, just like in ancient Sumer. And these are the people who help to run the government. Obviously, the government officials help run the government, collect taxes, do things like that, enforce the laws, and help write the laws. And then the priests that run the temples, and Egyptian society, that we'll talk a lot about this, is polytheistic again. So that means they have a belief in many gods. And Egyptian religion is one of these bases, is a basis of all of Egyptian society. So priests in the temples play an incredibly important role. Okay? And again, since this was the second group on the social pyramid, on the social pyramid, it means that they were powerful people. The nobles are powerful. This means that some of their power comes from their wealth that they have. and there were not an enormous number of them, which is again why it looks this way. Okay, a little bit lower, not a lot of them, but they're higher up on that social pyramid. Okay, wealth and power. So below the Pharaoh, who's the king of Egypt, ruling as a living god on earth, unquestionable, all-powerful, you have the nobles. Nobles are two groups broken up into the government employees, the government officials, the judges, and the people that help write laws and enforce the laws for the Pharaoh. You might also have government officials like the military leaders here. And then, of course, you have the priests that run the temples. Below that, the educated elite that are the scribes that have a very valuable job, and especially for the Pharaoh. Think about it. If you're a scribe and the Pharaoh wants you to tell his story, and we're reading those stories on tomb and pyramid walls 4,000 years later, then the scribe was an important person because they ensured that that Pharaoh's legacy, his history, his story carried on. And of course, the people that have a skill set of making things are the craftspeople, and they are considered more important than the people that are farmers, servants, and slaves. After you do your reading, I want you to think, when you answer your questions, about why having a large number of people that are farmers, servants, and slaves, the largest group or segment of the population, what is one thing that can be a benefit and one thing that can be bad about that or a negative about that. Okay? Next, you're going to go into Google Classroom for today's date, 10/27. You've listened to this lesson video now. You're going to read the pages that it states. Then you are going to answer the questions with that information.